guys, welcome back to another episode of Beyond Belief. It is season 2, and I am so excited to get started. Guys, I have an amazing guest to start the season out with. I am here today with Katie Sutton. She has such an inspiring testimony that she shared with me on Facebook, and I knew I wanted to get her on the podcast this season, just so we know a little bit about her. From the trap house to the streets, redeemed by Jesus, now serving his kingdom. That's how she describes herself on Facebook. And I love a good testimony. Katie, welcome to Beyond Belief. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Well, Katie, first off, I want to say I am so grateful that we connected on Facebook. You shared some of your testimony, and thank you for taking the time to join me here today.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime I can share my story because I know that, it's a heck of a redemption story. Like I know that it can help somebody. So it's always an honor to get to share it.
Absolutely. Well, Katie, as I kind of told you before, my first question for all my guests is always, what is the most beyond belief moment that God has had in your life so far?
I mean, there has been so many, but a lot of people do not know that in 2024 I was in a horrible, very tragic accident. Well, it wasn't an accident. It was something that was purposely done, but to me, it was an accident. A lot of people don't know in 2024, before, ministry, before the person I am today, I was in a horrible shooting that put me in a wheelchair for majority of 2024. I lost my soulmate. I was homeless on the streets of Tulsa. And, I was clean from methamphetamine already. I'd been clean for 5 months, and another homeless man decided that he wanted to just shoot us up, I guess. Uh, but he killed my soulmate right in front of me, but, um, I wasn't ever supposed to walk again.
Hmm.
It shattered, one of the bullets. I got shot 3 times. One of the bullets shattered,
Wow.
the joint that connects your femur and your hip bone together. And at that point in time, I was devastated. And my biggest beyond belief moment is the whole year of 2024, just everything. The shooting happened in February. I was told I'd never walk again, so I had to call, like, my estranged family, and the reason we were estranged is because of my long-term addiction.
Hmm.
I had to call them here in Tennessee. Like I said, I was in Tulsa, Oklahoma at the time, and, they, no questions asked, came and got me, which was amazing 'cause we didn't talk. And I was angry at God. I was angry at my life. My soulmate had just gotten taken away. And I went to church one day and this was probably May of that year. I was just so downhearted. And, I just found out that, like, I would have to go back to Tulsa for a trial, for a murder trial, essentially. And, like, it hurt, that hurt my feelings that
Hmm.
I would have to go back through that. But I was in my wheelchair, and the preacher preached about, "Aren't you glad you don't look like what you've been through?"
Hmm.
And that right here in my heart, like, it crushed me. I was like, "Oh man, you have no idea." And I wheeled up to the altar, and they anointed me with oil. Now they had anointed me. Let me pause here for a second. They had anointed me before. They had prayed over me, but I'd never really received it. I
Right.
had, I was still angry, but this time I received it. And a preacher friend of mine, very good friend of mine, put his hand on my leg, and he started praying for it to be restored. And during that prayer, my leg started twitching for the first time in
Wow.
months. And within 2 weeks, I was up and I was on a walker. And before I went to trial, in October of 2024, my goal was I wanted to walk in the courtroom. I
Mhm.
I I wanted to walk past the man who essentially I thought destroyed my life, and I did.
Wow, Katie, what a powerful testimony. And I know that's just scratching the surface,
Oh,
from what
yes.
you've shared, but I I love how open you are, and these are the types of miracles and signs and wonders that I think they happen all over the place in the United States, around the world, but we don't find as many people being as willing to openly
Mhm.
admit, yes, this is what happened. This is the Lord came and he healed me. And literally you were able to walk. And Katie, just so my guests know, are you fully able to walk today?
Absolutely.
That is so awesome.
So when I got shot, I was training to do my very first 5K in Tulsa, downtown Tulsa. I was going to do it
Okay.
in the following months in April. And it was my way to celebrate I was drug free. And then I got shot and I didn't get
Mhm.
to. So this year for my birthday, well, last year for my birthday, we started ministry and we'll talk about that here in a minute. This year for
Mhm.
my birthday, I am running my very first 5K.
That is so awesome. I have to be honest, Kitty, me and my brother, at my, um, corporate office that I work for, they had their very first 5K in 2023, I think, maybe 24, and me and my brother did that. It was my very first 5K, and so I can't run one myself, but the fact that you're training for it now after everything, awesome, props off to you. I think we're friends on Facebook, so I wanna make sure I share. I can't wait to see just you cross that finish line because it is such a complete turnaround, to your testimony. Um I'm saying a lot, Katie. I apologize today. Let's jump in. Tell me a little bit more about your life and your beginnings. I know you mentioned you kind of grew up in the church a little bit. What was your childhood like, and where did you go from the beginning to where you're at today?
My childhood, we grew up pretty poor.
Hmm.
And then you know, a split home. My parents divorced whenever I was about 12 years old.
Hmm.
And that was a really hard time because, my 6th grade year, I went to like 4 different schools that year.
Wow.
And making friends was impossible. I grew up a very, very lonely person. When my sister got married, she's 2 years older than me. When my sister got married, like, that was my best friend,
Hmm.
and she basically did it to get out from underneath my mom at that
Gotcha.
point in time, because our mom taught us how to cook, how to clean, how to do laundry. Like, she didn't teach us how to do hair, how to do makeup, how to be feminine,
Hmm.
but she taught us those things so she didn't have to do them.
Understood.
And, it made life really hard for me and my sisters, so when my sister left, all that kinda fell down on me,
Hmm.
and I worked a full-time job in high school. I was an honor student. I was in choir. I paid basically all my mom's bills,
Hmm.
and I would literally, like, all of that, and then, 2 weeks after I turned 18, I come home and my stuff is on the curb.
Wow.
Yeah, shocker. So, when I
So.
said earlier that my family and I were estranged because of my addiction, that estrangement actually happened way, way pre-addiction, just a
Mhm.
little more deeper during.
Gotcha. So you're 18, you come home, all your things have been kind of thrown out in the door. What what did you where did you find yourself going? How Where'd you go from there?
So, for my 18th birthday, my dad gave me a car, and it was a 1990 Ford Taurus station wagon. And it was this horrible root beer brown, and I'll never forget loading up all my stuff off the curb in the back of that
Mhm,
car. And that was the first time I was homeless. Was, just a couple of weeks after I turned 18, right before graduation was gonna take place. And that's I guess where majority of like my homeless problems began. I wasn't always homeless.
mhm.
But that was the first time I was homeless.
The first Okay, and then so that's your first time where you've been homeless. How long until you kind of, got your feeding and you were able to be in a home, or what kind of transpired there until we get to the point where you're coming back, reuniting with your family, getting back in the church?
Oof. A lot. Um, I went to my dad's,
Mhm,
and it wasn't a healthy environment. It was a trap house because of my
mhm,
brother. And I started drinking. I was underage. I started drinking and I got pregnant with my long-term boyfriend with my first child.
mhm.
And just kind of spiraled. And
Abs
me and him ended up going our separate ways not long after our son was born. And I met a man in church. Our very first date, like, we went to church was our first date, and I ended up marrying that man. And
Okay.
it wasn't until, about a month before our wedding that he started being very abusive, and he just wasn't a good man, and I don't wanna linger too long on that. He just wasn't a good man.
No, absolutely, and we don't have to linger on any part of your story you don't want to. I think one of the places I'd like to go, um, is you mentioned when you kind of were telling me your story, um, there was a something that pulled you into a church in Oklahoma, from your time there. I would love to hear more about that story.
So, when I became homeless in Oklahoma, it was earlier in 2023. I had gotten kind of a routine of, this place would serve lunch on this day. I can go here on this day and get some clean clothes. And like, you kind of get in a routine.
Mhm,
And I was high on meth. I was still on drugs then. And I was very lonely. And I went to this church for two reasons. I knew that at 1 o'clock they had like a little 15-minute service for the unhoused community, and they would feed you afterwards. And I also
mhm.
knew that a really good friend of mine that had been missing for a couple weeks frequented that service and utilized the food as well. And I went that day, and it was just what they were speaking about. It really hit home.
Mhm.
And I started crying, just bawling my eyes out in the middle of what they were talking about. And when you're on the streets, you don't cry in front of people. Like, that's a sign of weakness. And I was so ashamed afterwards, but I'm so glad that it happened the way that it did. But in the midst of me crying and them talking, there was a woman that walked over to me, and I know her now as Mama Butterfly.
Mhm.
Um, she walked over to me and she said something, like she just whispered in my ear, and you could tell it was straight from the voice, like, from the mouth of God. Like,
Mhm.
she was telling me things that I hadn't told a soul, telling me that my family misses me, that they're praying for me, that they're standing in intercession for me, that I have got a future and my story is gonna save lives. I need to, I need to go home. And the
Hmm.
whole time she had her hand right here on my chest. And at one point in time, I went to go turn and run, and it was like a hand was on my back. I couldn't move.
Hmm.
And before she moved her hand, now I had a hoodie on. I had a hoodie on, so she didn't know this tattoo was there. Before she moved her hand, she whispered in my ear, she said, "Fly free, butterfly." And I started bawling again. I knew in that moment, like, that was God speaking through her. Like, I knew.
Absolutely. That's such a powerful moment. Now, I have to ask, was that your first real kind of deep encounter with God like that? Was someone speaking a word directly to you and saying things that only God would be able to give to them to tell you? Or had you had other experiences like that in your life?
I had thought I had other experiences like that,
Hmm.
but I guess once you actually encounter it, like,
Right.
and I knew, like, in that moment, like, I knew. And, you know, it's not what somebody tells you, but it's what you take from it.
Right.
And what happened after that conversation 3 days later is probably one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in Tulsa, Oklahoma in my life.
Hmm.
And, I pondered that conversation for 3 days. Uh, I mean, that's how deeply it affected me. Now, when she said what she said to me, like, I had drugs in my bra, I was
Right.
dirty, I was high, but I could still recognize and know the voice of God, and that's just how amazing God is. Like, it doesn't matter how messed up you are, if you know his voice, you're gonna know his voice.
Hmm.
But what happened after that, I pondered on it for 3 days, and I went back to camp. I was like, "I'm just
Hmm.
gonna go to sleep." And I did. I dreamed of home that night, the first time I dreamed of, coming back to Tennessee and probably ever. I dreamed of my mom, I dreamed of my dad, I mean, my family, and I woke up in the morning and, I got my drugs out and lined it up, getting ready to do it, and I dropped the door of my tent, and when like, if you've never been awestruck, you don't know what I'm talking about, but, like, I was awestruck by what I saw. There was hundreds, if not thousands, of just beautiful butterflies outside of my tent.
Wow.
And it was probably the most beautiful thing I've ever seen in my life other than my children being born.
Hmm.
Um, it was beautiful, and, I had my dope on my lap, and I look out and, like, I don't know how long I cried out to God, but by the time I was done and I finally opened my eyes, the butterflies were gone and the sun was high in the sky. And that was on September the 12th of 2023 when I took my dope and just dust to the wind, and I haven't touched it since.
Wow. First off, Katie, congratulations.
Thank
Um,
you.
I I mean, I know there are so many people who have struggled with addiction, but I also think you have such a strong testimony for the way God can work. He's a very suddenly God, but at the same time, sometimes he gives something to you and it takes those days to process it until that suddenly happens. I know, I believe it's Ron Carpenter. One of the preachers that has visited my church before talks about that. He's a God of suddenly. It's his suddenly, not our suddenly. So even though
Mhm.
we often think that it needs to happen as soon as he says it happens, no, it happens when it's meant to happen under him. And I think you just showed that testimony through and through. That is so amazing. And again, congratulations. That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank
Absolutely.
you.
All right. And then I think we're almost there to talk about your awesome ministry. I think there's one other uh puzzle that kind of connects your whole story together. And correct me if I'm wrong. You have a friend who unfortunately is no longer with us, and he kind of had given and spoken that idea that later was birthed out your ministry. So why don't you take us on a journey and share with us the name of your friend? I don't have it written down here, so I do apologize, and kind of tell us more about your ministry.
So my friend's name was Alcides Monroy. Um, we called him Junior.
Hmm.
About 2 weeks prior to the shooting, we were coming out of camp. We camped together, and we were heading to the dumpster to get food.
Mm.
And it was it was just crazy how this whole conversation went down and how it later came into play. But we were walking to the dumpster to get food, foraging for food is what we called it. And this car pulled up next to us and they're like, "Hey, are you guys hungry?" And we're like, "Oh, you have no idea. Yeah, we're on our way to a dumpster." And they give us a couple of brown bags that have food in them.
Mhm.
And we're walking and Junior, he's Puerto Rican and he looks at me and he's like, "Sis, we should do this. We should do this, sis." And I'm like, "What?" And he's like, we should help people in the community once we're off the streets, man. He's like, "Man, we should do this." And I was like, "Man, okay." And we open up the food and it's hot dogs. And he
Mhm.
takes a bite of the hot dog and he's like, this right here is what we should do. I said, "What? Give away hot dogs?" He's like, "Man, hot dogs sure do bring a lot of hope." And I'm just like, you know what? They sure do. Um, that conversation led us to where we are today with the name that we have for the ministry that we have.
Mhm.
Hot Dogs of Hope was born. We call it born because it is a labor of love. It was born last year, April 26th, 2025, on my
Mhm.
birthday. And it started out, the year before, 2024, I didn't celebrate my birthday. I was in a wheelchair. I hated everybody. I was miserable.
Mhm.
I didn't want to celebrate. So when my mom came to me last year, she asked me, she said, "What do you want to do for your birthday?" And I said, "I want to have a cookout. I want to celebrate me. Just
Mhm.
I want to celebrate my sobriety. I want to celebrate trial. I had to go through trial. I had to write my victim impact statement. We had a sentencing that we had to get through. I want to actually celebrate me and everything that I've overcame." And she said, "Cool. Okay. We'll do that." I went to bed the very same night and I had basically a conversation with God. And he had such a
Mhm.
sweet but stern voice. And you couldn't see his face. It was so bright. Like looking at it, it was like looking at the sun. And we were talking about, feeding the homeless. And he specifically said, "Go show love and compassion that you were shown when you were on the streets."
Mhm.
And I told the Lord, I said, "Jesus, I don't want to go back to the streets." I I worked hard to get off those streets and quite frankly, I'm scared, you know?
Mhm.
Um he told me, he's like, "You're going to do it and you're not going to have any fear."
Mhm.
Okay, Lord. I woke up, it's like 3 o'clock in the morning, and even now just talking about it, like, I get goosebumps, and I could feel just the Holy Spirit, but you could feel just the presence of God, like, right there in my bedroom.
Mhm.
And, my mom, she wakes up at, like, 4 o'clock in the morning. She drives, for the school bus system, so she's up early. So I get
Okay.
up and I make coffee at this point. I'm so excited I can't go back to sleep. And she comes out of her room, she's like, "What are you doing up?" And I was like, "Change plans for my birthday. This is what I wanna do. I wanna feed the homeless," so on and so forth. Like, in that hour of that dream, me getting up and having like, I had this whole plan worked out in my head already, like,
Right.
and she told me, she said, "Okay, well, okay." She told me to call my uncle, which has a church in the area where we wanted to go serve. I made that one phone call. We got a location, a date, a time, everything. And our first time out, we were blessed with so many donations. We were able to feed. We had the capacity to feed 500 people. We had the
Mhm.
goal to feed 50 people. Like, that was my original goal, 50 people. And we ended up feeding 125 the first time we went out.
Wow. That is incredible.
Yes. We had one give his life to the Lord that day. We prayed over everybody, and when we were done, my uncle looks at me and he's like, "We gotta do this again." He's like, "We gotta
Mhm.
think of a name." And in that moment, I remembered that conversation that I had with Junior just before we got shot. And I was like, "Hot dogs of hope." And that's how we were born. That's, we believe in love and compassion and meeting people right where they are.
Absolutely. Well, first off, such an amazing turn of events. I mean, from the beginning of your story to where you are now, the way your testimony has brought up a ministry in and of itself is so remarkable, Katie. And I know it's the Lord's work through you, but I just want to say congratulations for
Thank
all that
you.
you've been able to achieve. I mean, it is such an incredible story. I'm so happy we can share it with both our audiences today. Tell me more about Hot Dogs of Hope. How often do you guys have events? Is it kind of weekly? Do you put on events at certain times? Let our viewers know what does that format kind of look like for you?
So for us, we go out, and so we have two different ways that we do it. We have a kind of like a grab and go where we kind of just serve from the car, just roll up, "Hey, you guys hungry? Do you need some hygiene?" And we'll have some stuff pre-made.
Hmm.
And then we have our setup and serve. And that's when we go out and we have, we have an open grill. We cook everything on site. We set up our food, we have drinks, and then we have our hygiene and warming table that has like hot hands, our hygiene items, blankets, and stuff like that.
Hmm.
And the second part of your question, right now, like I said, we do the grab and go almost every Monday. We don't do it every Monday, but just about every Monday.
Okay.
We do our setup and serve on the fourth Saturday of every month, but we are in the process of scouting out a secondary location so we can start doing it twice a month.
That is incredible. Now, do you stay kind of localized in Tennessee? Have you kind of went out in other neighborhoods before, or am I thinking too far in advance for what your future plans are?
You're a little too far in advance. Now, we do at this
Hmm.
moment, we cover 3 counties.
Okay.
Yeah, so we cover the greater Knoxville area and then 2 surrounding counties beside it, so.
Okay. That's absolutely awesome. Um, how, and you might not have these numbers in front of you, so I apologize. How many people have you helped since last year when this kind of first came to be? Do you know?
So, I do not need those numbers in front of me. I have it all right here. So we have served over 5,000 hot dogs, which is about 2,500 people at 2 hot dogs apiece.
Wow.
We have sponsored about 60 people to get their documents to move them forward, documents meaning ID, birth certificates, and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And we have sponsored or co-sponsored about 12 people getting into rehab programs.
That is I had no idea you were gonna give all those numbers, Katie. That is I almost don't have words. Oh my goodness. That is so awesome. Um, Tell me a little bit more. So I'm guessing the full setup events, you can have like some preaching or maybe a little bit of speaking. What does that format? Tell me what a day of that looks like.
So a day of setup is a day of chaos for me. Um, no, a day of setup, like, um, you know, we meet at the park. Of course, me and the boyfriend's always first ones there, because everything's here. So we set up at the park, and at 11:30 we have an opening prayer, and we do a safety meeting, and basically it's,
Mhm.
hey, we don't give out money, we don't give out rides, don't venture off by yourself. See something, say something, do something type thing. We don't allow
Right.
drugs, violence, anyways. We do that, and then between 11:30 and 12, we do our setup, and we start cooking our hot dogs, and then at 12 o'clock, we feed until about a quarter till 2, and then, um, around 1:45, 2 o'clock, we always have a preacher friend out there with us, and he always brings us a good word, about a 15-minute little message,
Mhm.
at the end, and then we will wrap up and load everything up. But we always make a point to make about 30 bags, to go bags, to go serve off-site.
Okay.
So,
So even on those days, it's like, yes, we're here, but we're also still going to go out in the community just a little further.
yep.
That's so awesome.
Well, there's
Wow.
people who, they don't have the means to get to the park. Either they're older, or and they're have mobility issues, or they're just way across town, and there's not a lot of resources over there. So we try to get in where we can and help people, and there's a big need to be met.
Absolutely. And Katie, I have to be honest, you are clearly going out and helping meet that need. I mean, I didn't know your numbers, so I'll be honest, to know how many lives that you have been able to affect in just a year is remarkable. So such a beautiful ministry you have there. How can people get involved? How can we support your ministry? How can we know what's going on? Where do we need to go?
So the best way to keep up to date anything Hot Dogs of Hope is come find us over on Facebook, and you can just type in Hot Dogs of Hope. We're the
Mhm.
only one you will ever find on there. Um, how to support, like, just go over there, check out the page. We have a Venmo set up. We have an Amazon wish list. We are not a registered nonprofit yet, but that is
Mhm.
something that we do have in the works going for this year. So we're really excited about
Absolutely.
that.
When you get registered, I wanna know, I wanna give a report to my podcast letting them know just how much you have, kind of advanced because that's so incredible. Um, Say we have people watching right now in Tennessee, is Facebook the best place to reach out and say, "Hey, I'd like to
Absolutely.
go ahead and jump in and support as well"?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, Katie, it has been such a pleasure. I'm not gonna lie, I didn't expect some of the things to come out today. I I love your story. I'm not gonna lie. I've been talking about it since we first messaged with some of my friends, just saying, I had this awesome, awesome testimony that I can't wait to share and to hear where you started to where you are now. I mean, look at God. Look
Oh,
at
it
God.
it it's only God, and I give all praise and glory to him, because I mean, if somebody needs to hear about grace and about mercy, like, I will gladly let them listen to my story because, I mean, like I said, like you said earlier, we just kind of skimmed the surface a little bit, but I
Mhm.
mean, God has been so good to me and he has shown me grace and mercy that I know that I don't deserve, but he knows that I do. So,
Absolutely, and Katie, I can tell you have that heart of a servant. Um, One last thing, because I don't believe I asked, how can people follow you personally if they wanna help support you?
so Katie Sutton on Facebook, and then all other forms of social media is tagged under Hot Dogs of Hope,
Okay.
TikTok, Instagram, and stuff like that.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I can't wait to just see everyone jump in and support. I know you are going to go so far. Thank you so much for being a guest today, Katie. Is there
Thank
anything
you.
else you want to share with everybody before we kind of end the episode today?
Recovery is possible.
Beautiful. Great ending, Katie. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tyler.